the moderator, and he's going to bring up the rest of your panelists.
So I want to start out talking about the potential for the Internet of Things. It's been compared, I heard somebody compare it to the Internet in 1994, as in this giant thing that is just on the cusp of just 1 or 2 years away from being huge. Do you think that that's true? How quickly do you think that the Internet of Things is going to become as big as it could be? Gilad, if you want to start with that.
So yeah, I definitely think it's going to be huge and revolutionary in ways that are very similar to the internet or to the smartphone phenomena. I do think that currently it's very much a supply-driven phenomena, meaning the device manufacturer are the ones pushing the solutions rather than the consumer screaming for the need. And I do think there's an evolutionary process that has to happen in terms of the value proposition, the user experience, etc., to really lock this value and have mass adoption. But definitely, I'm betting my life here on this.
So I mean, the question is, how quickly? Do you think it's going to be 1 to 2 years, 5, 10? How long before we see this really penetrate?
I don't think the Internet of Things is a thing that you can categorize as one segment. I think it's going to be very much segmented. You see these wellness and these wearable phenomena now that's evolving relatively faster than others. Automotive, home appliances will all have their own inflection point. I do think that we're now in this stage of wearables. Home will come, automotive will come. By the end of this decade, I imagine our daily life will be vastly different, influenced by IoT.
So that kind of gets to my next question, and Greg, you can answer this. How will it penetrate? You said there's not too much of a consumer, they're not screaming out for this yet, but what will make them want this? How will you market this to the consumer?
Well, I think number one, it's about ease of use, and like in the example I showed, it's pretty hard to program your irrigation controller. So I think number one, it'll be changing the way we interact with these products, and I think the other enabling aspect will be if like Facebook or Google gets into providing a ubiquitous cloud and place to store your data, so then it's easy to bring in these things in your home and they're all connected to the same cloud. I think that also will accelerate it.
How much does telling people how much they can save, like with the Nest thermostat saying you can save X amount on your heating bill, or if you have a smart faucet, you can save X amount on your water bill. How much does that, do you believe that will entice people to want these products?
We have one customer in Europe, so he ran it's a German utility actually, and so they ran a test case in Sweden and with the smart plugs. So basically, where you could see how much energy you were consuming and you could manage it, and the savings were 11%. And so for them, they marketed that as around the world, nuclear power plants are like 11 or 12% of the energy. So they're like, oh, we could like not have nukes. So the translation of what matters to people, I think, is going to differ. And I'm kind of more on the side of the use of the product, that people have to want the product, because even like some of the smart plugs that are marketed here in the US, if you plug them into the wall, it's actually a router, and so it burns like 3 watts. So even though you think you're saving energy, you're actually burning energy. So I think it's going to be more around changing the product and people really wanting the product, because it makes their life simpler, easier, as opposed to saving 10% of the electric bill. That's my 2 cents anyway.
So do you think the technology is just not there yet to save people money, or why has that not taken off? Why do those smart plugs cost more energy than they save? Why has the technology not been there yet?
Well, in that case, it just uses a single router and a single chip router. So it's the same technology that's in your actual access point. They just move that into the plug. So yes, that's a case where, like the low power embedded Wi-Fi wasn't there yet, for example. But that's changing now with a lot of the, companies like ourselves, and then Broadcom and Qualcomm are getting into this market. So I think you're going to see more and more devices available. But I still think it's going to boil down to the product has to provide a lot more features and a lot more value than just saving electricity, for example.
I'm going to pivot a little bit and talk about Google's acquisition of Nest, because I think that was, I want to talk to you, Rob, about this. Is that a sign that other companies like Facebook, Yahoo, Apple, Microsoft are also going to be getting into this space? And is that a wise investment for them? What did they get out of it?
Well, I think backing up, you asked about Nest. We were a very early investor in Nest, so a Series A investor back when it was 10 people in a garage. And a lot of entrepreneurs look at exits like that and they think, wow, my company's worth at least $2 billion or $1 billion. The reality is it's only one or two companies in a given category that can realize that kind of value.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that what a lot of people miss there is that not only were they doing well from a sales perspective, but literally that team is the best hardware team in the world. They were the people that brought 15 generations of the iPod to market, the first 2 generations of the iPhone to market. And for Google to bring that in and then be able to supply unlimited capital to that team was very attractive to the team. So it's hard to draw direct analogies there. I think it is, though, a measure of how important great consumer electronics products are. And I would say, to build on this comment before, I don't think about the Internet of Things. I don't think consumers care about the Internet of Things. I think it's kind of fun to talk about and think about the idea of anything that's valuable enough to be bought, sold, or stolen to be connected to the Internet. But people care about great products that they look at, they touch, and help them. And the only thing I would completely disagree with is it's not about bringing lots of features. It's actually about delivering the value. That's the core proposition. Mm-hmm. And that's really the only thing consumers care about. So if internet connectivity allows the product to get better with time because of regular software updates and connecting to internet services, then consumers will like it. But it's something that it happens to do. It's not because it's an Internet of Things product.
You talked about it from the perspective of Nest, what they got out of being bought by Google. What does Google get out of Nest? Is it simply data, or what's the future of that for them?
You know, that's not something I'd like to really comment on or speculate about. But what they have talked about is Tony Fadell reports directly to Larry Page, and they're going to continue down the path of things that they've done in the past. They're very focused on continuing to build Nest.
Okay. Gilad, I'm going to give this question to you. Talk to me about the difference between consumer IoT and enterprise IoT. It's very easy, I think, to visualize what consumer IoT looks like. You get a thermostat, it's smart, you connect to the internet on it, but what does that look like for the enterprise? And is that going to be, where is the money going to be? Is it going to be on the consumer side or the enterprise side?
Okay, so I can give my 2 cents, although it's not really, I'm very much a consumer-oriented, strategist, but so machine-to-machine essentially has been around for almost 5 decades, right? Siemens implemented that in supply chain and manufacturing processes. And I think machine-to-machine mainly revolves around efficiency. And that is still the case today. GE, AT&T have almost megalomaniac ambitions to conquer what's called now industrial IoT. I do think that these attempts were somewhat attempted in the consumer as well. Home automation has been around for 3 decades. It's just been one failed attempt after the other, and maybe there are things that will make it different now. But I do think that the money currently is in the industrial side. The vision might be on the consumer side, but the short-term effects of what machine-to-machine can provide to a process, to a manufacturing process, supply chain, et cetera, are vast. When you go into the consumer, then the industrial side can enjoy the data and do stuff with that.
Mm-hmm.
Google,
Yeah.
for example.
I'd jump in and say, I think it's clearly the money is in enterprise unless it's a very specific vertical that gets identified in the consumer space. So I think Nest has done that. I think Sonos has done that. You look at these speakers are amazing because they're connected to these web music services, whether you like Songza or you like Pandora or you like Spotify. The piece that people are missing when they think about the internet connected or the intelligent coffee maker or the intelligent refrigerator is they think about, I'm going to take my pictures and I'm going to put them on the front of the refrigerator. Or I'm going to have the coffee maker that turns itself on in the morning because it's connected to this Belkin thing that can tell if somebody wakes up. Where the money is going to be and what's going to be interesting is enterprises, the people that make these white goods are going to want to instrument their products. And as Gainspan and others make their stuff cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, every coffee maker is going to be connected to the internet. And the reason it's going to be connected to the internet is because the people that make the coffee makers are going to want to know how their coffee makers are used. And if that only adds, say, 50 cents or $1 to the bill of materials, then I start to be able to do other things that the Keurig customer might actually want. I start to be able to see how often is it used. I start to be able to bring web metrics to it to be able to see, hey, it looks like it's starting to wear out, or this is a customer that I might actually want to promote to, or if I own a refrigerator, I build a refrigerator, I know, okay, the water has been used so many times in the door, filling a glass of water. When I sell the refrigerator, if it's a high-end refrigerator, I might say, you know what? I'll send you water filters every time I can tell you've used it 1,000 times. That's value add. That's very different. And that infrastructure does not face the consumer. It really faces the enterprise and the manufacturer of those products.
Next thing I want to talk about is, and Greg, you can maybe talk about this, is hardware versus software. And I almost have this vision where you're going to have software companies akin to almost Android, where they're going to put their software into other hardware. And you're going to have something like Apple, where they develop their own hardware and software in-house and only put their own software in their own hardware. Which of those models do you think will win out in the end? Which is more viable?
Yeah, that's a tough call, but because, by definition, this Internet of Things is hardware and software, and even though we're a hardcore semiconductor company, even though that's a dinosaur statement these days, but we have 5 times as many software people as hardware people. So a lot of the value is in the software and the solution we provide, and the chip is really just enabling that. So I think there's a big software content down inside the thing, and then of course the other aspect is the cloud or the connectivity, and so the software that's gonna use this thing to push advertisements to you or combine content with the sensor information, that's where the value is in a solution. And so it's really hard from my perspective to weight like the software with no hardware. That kind of makes no sense. And again, just to be like a chip company with no software, I would say that's of no value either.
Well, the question is whether it's going to be cost effective for the hardware companies to license out third-party software, or are they just going to develop it in-house? Is it that cheaper for them, or does it make more sense?
Well, I think there's 2 very different parts of the software. One is the cloud. So somebody has to pay for those servers running, and it's either going to be the consumer, which I don't think is so likely. So it's either buried in the product or it's going to come from advertising dollars, the same way that Gmail is funded. So I think that's one aspect of it is basically this cloud, the cloud funding, and where that money comes from.
Mm-hmm. Gilad, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I obviously disagree that it needs to be embedded. Is this good? Up, down? It needs to be embedded in one company. I think it's going to be an evolution. You're going to see all kinds of models. There's no doubt in my mind that some purely software or some purely hardware solutions will come and exist. I think today, in this very early evolutionary state, where everyone is still figuring out the DNA of a company that does hardware and the DNA that company that does software are somewhat different, and so you'll see more and more of these. I mean, it makes sense to some companies to do hardware as best as they can, consume software, and vice versa.
Rob, I'm going to give this next question to you. It's about the data that's collected and how we regulate it. We're living in an age of Snowden, basically, and people do not really trust these companies like Google or Facebook or any of them to have their data. So what happens to it? Is it regulated, or is it going to be up to the companies themselves who like Google with Nest, are they going to have to prove it to the consumers that they're not using their data for nefarious purposes, or that the NSA doesn't have access to it?
Yeah, I think in the context of the Internet of Things, it's just a continuation of what people have already done in the web. If you take a look at what people do on the web and you take a look at people's Google searches, you probably know a lot more about those people than you'll ever know with the devices in their homes. So I think the reality of the information about what people do in their homes is far less risky, per se, than what's already out there. So, I mean, think about the things you've searched for over time, things you might search for that are personal or family related, et cetera. That information is already out there. I think that's probably a bigger question than what is it for the Internet of Things.
So what you're saying is people really have no reason to worry because that data is out there anyway, so why this is nothing new for them, basically.
I think people are already worried about it, and I think
Yeah.
there's a lot that's going on with this right now, but at the end of the day, I don't mind having my cookies tracked on my computer because I would rather get advertisements for cars than party dresses. So when you think about the world we live in, there's already so much data collected. Think about your car. Your car, most modern cars actually track. They almost have like a black box in the car that knows what happens before an accident. That information is already there. Is that information that it should be shared or not? I mean, these are things that are already happening and have happened. So in a lot of ways, that genie is already out of the bottle. And then I think number two is you have to look at why does it matter? And if you look at, say, occupancy data in a house, that probably matters a lot. That's probably something that needs to be locked down. But it's not until you cross-reference occupancy with the actual location that you have risk.
Well, I think maybe the difference is that if you don't want to search on Google, you don't have to. But are we going to get to the point where every device is connected, and if you want a coffee maker, it's going to be connected to something, and you're not going to have a choice of whether or not that those companies get your data?
I think today I can't think of anybody in this room that could go a week without using a search engine. I mean, to take your point, your analogy, to extend it. And I think that as long as it makes it a better product, there's just a long history of consumer behavior accepting this. Think about all the boxes that everybody in this room has clicked for years now about terms of service.
Yeah.
How many people have read the terms of service soup to nuts? Has anybody in this room done that in the last month? Okay. Are you an attorney? Must be an attorney. How many people in the last year? Okay, two attorneys. And how many people ever, have probably done it? A lot of people haven't even looked at an entire terms of service. So we've been opting into this as a society for over a decade now.
Can I say something about? I actually agree that we're kind of screwed in the sense that there is no privacy. I do think so. The FTC is making some muscles, but they're not going to keep up with the pace. I do think that the fact that you have coming 10x type of data because of this Internet of Things, and there is a growing concern, and I do see potential for commercial solutions similar to PayPal, only on the data side, that will allow users to at least control better what is being exposed and for what value. At least give them the ability to decide.
We only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to talk to Greg. Greg, I want you to answer this question. Talk to me about the evolution of the Internet of Things. Like it was said before, they've been trying to do a connected home for the past couple of decades, and it just never caught on. So why now? What's changed in the technology and in the consumer mindset. What's different now than it was before that allows this to happen?
Well, I think number one, there's been just a consistent, shift from different technologies, so proprietary wireless, then you saw all this ANT stuff, and then Z-Wave, Zigbee, right? And none of those have really had the penetration of Wi-Fi. So one of the big changes is just the buildup of the Wi-Fi infrastructure. So I think 80% of the homes here in the U.S. have Wi-Fi connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
So that really changes the proposition, because you can go down to Lowe's and grab a Nest thermostat and bring it home and connect it. And with all these other technologies, it's not possible. You have to get a special box to convert, plug it into Ethernet, right? It was not this kind of a direct connection. So, so that's the biggest technology change that I see is now the penetration of Wi-Fi, and then it's less confusing compared to all these other technologies that we're competing. So I think that really provides this opportunity to accelerate things.
I want to wrap it up by asking each one of you to talk to me, because obviously the panel is about the future of the Internet of Things. Where you see this in the next 5 to 10 years, and I think Gilad, you should start, because obviously the whole point of your company is to change the way that we interact with our devices,
Right.
making them intelligent, not programmable, being able to detect your own patterns. And so talk to me where you think the space is going.
So as I said, I think the two major problems are a value proposition. I'll be very fast. One is value proposition, and two is the user experience. And I think on the latter side, user experience, as long as you're required to script and program, this is a Silicon Valley type solution. If you want to have a mass appeal, mass relevance, these solution needs to be, in a sense, enchanted. They need to understand you, react to you, respond to you, similar to how when I put buy in Google and you put buy in Google, we get personalized experience. Our home, our devices should react differently to us in different stages, to different people in our family, etc. So that's my 2 cents.
So is it more important to have smart devices than the connected home?
I think it's an evolutionary state. I think at some point you'll have no choice. If it's purely, it depends on the device, but it's purely a connectivity element. If instead of hitting the wall to hit the light, you hit the phone, I'm not going to pay a lot of money for that. I need the light to understand I'm underneath, it's dark, it's shut off, and usually I turn it on at this point. That's smart, not purely connected.
Yep.
Yeah, and then to add on to that, and that takes some expertise to figure out that that's the value proposition, that's how you want the device to behave, and then to program it. And so it's just going to take time for these products to evolve from where they are today to actually perform these value-added services. And plus, we're talking about like a refrigerator or some electromechanical device. Those take time to develop. So I think the market's going to grow, but it's just going to take time for these products to be produced and evolve, and then be refined.
All right, in the last 15 seconds, Rob, talk to me about the future of the Internet of Things.
Yeah, very quickly, I think every device that gets plugged into the wall in your home will end up being connected to the internet. And it's going to happen because the people that make those products are going to want to get generalized feedback, anonymized feedback about how people actually use their products, and bring web techniques to designing better user-friendly products.
Great, and we're out of time, so thank you very much.